Welcome to the Combat Learning Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Josh Peacock. Before I throw you into the episode, I launched a Substack, combatlearning.substack.com, and I have launched a series of articles that are companions to the book by Rob Gray, How We Learn to Move. So I take each chapter, I summarize it in my own words, and then I go into depth, applying it specifically to martial arts and combat sports, how it can make you a better coach, how it can make your understanding better, and of course, how to design better practices. So head on over to combatlearning.substack.com. And if you're not, sign up to the email list. Now, if you're already on the free email list, you're going to be getting emails through Substack from now on. And so if you want access to those companion articles and other articles such as, paper reviews, applying ecological and other types of science specifically to martial arts, most of those are going to be a part of a paid subscription. There's already a few of those up, and I'm about to release another one. So if you want access to those, it's $9 a month. That's the cheapest it's probably ever going to be. And in a little while, I'm actually going to raise the price up. So if you want to get on the paid newsletter and get access to all those different kinds of articles, those series and companion articles and paper reviews and all those sorts of things, make sure that you sign up as soon as possible because the price is going to go up. All right, guys, thank you. I will see you on the next episode.
Yeah, and it just makes it easier because then it's fun. You get to choose a fun way to play this day. Because I know I'll go into school, when you get experience, you go into school today I'm gonna mostly try and just be an outside passer guy, and you'll naturally do that yourself. So to introduce everything from sort of that lens makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just let people are going to tend towards what works for them, and they don't need to have a crystallized game in the beginning. Everybody has to go through a development arc. And so what works for you when you first start playing around with a style of play is not going to be the same place you're going to be a year or two from now if you continue to train and play around with that style of play. You have to go through the development arc. You don't have to have the key A game from the beginning, right? As you play around and you actually begin to open up, and 6 months later you might have a much stronger game that's a style of play that's just totally different than where you started. So you go through that attractors, to use an ecological dynamics term. You start with your attractor states or your attractors in a certain landscape. And then as you practice, everything sort of changes and develops and, diversifies and then reconsolidates. You might have a totally different game by the end of it. So you have to let people explore, fail, and go through that iteration cycle.
Yeah. Something you mentioned there, it's totally unrelated. So often I see coaches who want to make a student stop doing a thing that they can do innately, that
Yep.
they gravitate towards, either
Yeah.
because, hey, currently it's overpowered, or later it'll be a problem, or you're able to do it so consistently. But sometimes I feel like that's like we judo, they have a name for having one thing that you gravitate towards, and is your signature thing that everything is built around, right? And there it's embraced as a good idea to get an initial attractor, and then you branch out around it. Whereas jiu-jitsu, we're no, master of none, know it all. Stop trying to do the one thing that's working. Try something that, we do that a lot.
Right.
But if we think of skill acquisition, right? It's secretly a little bit of a confidence game too in some ways, right? If I need a little bit of success, or even not success, I need a little bit of stability so that I can grow.
Right.
If I'm not allowed to do the one thing that I can sort of do, or hey, I'm a big guy, so I lean on everything. Let the man lean, right? Until he can get acquainted with everything else that's happening. Until then, you're telling him, don't do the one thing that you can do. Hard sell. hard for me to engage because now I'm like, am I supposed to do this or that? Da, 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 da. Just let them play like more, like I see it all the time. Like I'm a part of several different like jiu-jitsu communities. And like, my coach told me to stop straight foot locking everyone. I'm a white belt. What should I do? It's like I'm saying straight foot lock everyone forever now. And then
Yeah.
build the style, things around that.
Yeah.
Or like, if you're the big guy, lean on me until you can't lean on someone, but lean on them until then, like things like that. It's very fascinating because like let the person be good at something, even if the thing they're good at sucks. And that sounds bad, but that's part of them learning then that they find their own way. That's not you telling me that was a good or bad way to solve a problem. I just get to internally know problem solved or problem not solved, which I think is what we want people to be doing, right? I don't want them to stress about how they do a thing, just that they can do things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's so wild. I talked to someone and I was like, you can't use instruction to stop people from making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
They are going to make those mistakes whether you told them not to make them or not. You might prevent them from like one detail, but there's always one other important thing that's going to give way, right? And usually you can't stop them from making almost any of the mistakes because you just have to. Your body has to calibrate and find its way into organizing the right way in a functional way. But there's so many instructors that will say that's ridiculous. Like you are crazy. You have you must be stupid or cross-eyed or something. Like why in the world would you ever state that you can't stop a student from making mistakes, common mistakes? But if you were to change the analogy or to change the context, it's like saying that the chess world champion, Magnus Carlsen, I think is his name, that it's like saying that he never had to be 900 elo rating at some point. Like that you can just skip to being that with
Mm-hmm.
through a process of unrelenting instruction on details. You can skip somebody from whatever you begin at to master level elo rating, right? Which is absurd. No chess person would ever say that there's a point in time where you don't have to be like 900 elo, right? Through your
Mm-hmm.
development. And I think a part of that problem is the reason why instructors they don't feel this viscerally, and so they say that you can actually stop students from making all of these mistakes if only they would listen to you, if only they could manage all the details in their head, if only they
Mm-hmm.
could remember all the things you told them. If we actually had a relatively objective number which moved like elo rating and within the phase of the stages of development, which we could cut up the elo ratings in phases of development like chess does, and those phases were actually attached to the belt. Because right now the belt is like, what is it? Well, maybe you're doing okay with white belts and blue belts, so you're sort of with blue belts, but you're definitely can handle your own with most of the white belts. Okay, we're going to promote you to blue belt, right? That's one way to do it. Super. There's no objective. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing going on there that's objective. Or, several curriculums are like, well, if you know these techniques and you can do them with really good, you can do the sequence, the choreography in a way that looks the way with a certain aesthetic, the way I like it to look. If you can do that in the course of 30 minutes without making too many mistakes, then I'll give you your blue belt. And we'll throw in a demonstration role, right?
Right.
You get to roll to demonstrate, and everybody feels like they did something productive. Um, Neither one of those are particularly useful. I don't know how you would do something like an elo rating so that you can actually visualize shorter time scales of progress. Like you can actually see the number moving, right? Over the course of weeks, you can see it go up and down. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a general upward improvement as you go along. I don't know how to do that, especially for jujitsu. But I think that's probably one of the reasons why people actually think that you can skip phases of development. Um, it's also like in a totally like just off topic. It's also just theoretically unsound because from the research, we have a good idea now that you actually have to make mistakes to learn well.
Hmm.
And it's the discrepancies or the differentials that help you determine what's the most functional. It actually helps you improve. It's a feedback mechanism. So if you're trying to perform without making mistakes, it's going to take you longer to learn. You're not going to be able to do it. Your performance is going to be very brittle. You're not going to be very adaptable, and you're not certainly not going to be very precise. Um, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I do think that instructors are under this. I like to call it psychosis, so it can be maximally incendiary. They have this crazy psychosis idea that they can stop students and skip them through development with instruction because there is no representation of that progression. So they're not paying attention to students go through a sort of
Hmm.
averaged progression of certain things. And so they are under the idea that you can skip. You don't ever have to go through 900 elo, right? You can skip to 1000. You can skip to 1200, something crazy like that. In putting in martial arts terms, it's like saying that you never have to actually be a blue belt, or you never actually have to be a purple belt. Something kind of ridiculous like that.
Hmm. You know what's interesting about the thinking, hey, I can make you skip a mistake and make you do it right in your performance right now, is that mindset, in my opinion, is usually built off of just a not understanding that feedback you gave right then is creating a very short half-life of performance, right? Whereas
Right.
like I can correct you and you can do the thing, awesome. Will you do it when I walk away? That matters more that you can do it, but like I'm speaking as an instructor, it feels good. I said a thing, you fixed it. Fucking, I'm the man, bro. That's sick. I just
Yeah.
saved you
Yeah.
years of your life, not realizing that you helped them create an instance of a thing that looked like a thing, right? Not seeing here's the thing. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that they are misguided, but it's just because like they're the gap in the way that they view learning is just apparent. If I tell you it and you do it,
Yep.
check, right? But that's
Yeah.
not
You learned it,
transfer,
right?
That's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
we,
Yeah.
like it's a false positive, like boom, made an effect, right? But it's just interesting to if you recognize that you would let them flounder, you would point out a thing or two, and you would, that would be more your thing. Because I think sometimes that happens. Just they didn't understand that is just an instant correction. That's not a real behavior that will stick, and yeah, I feel you on that for sure.
Yeah. I think Stu Armstrong's called that the performance learning paradox, that just instruction always yields a immediate improvement in performance, but it's transient.
Hmm.
It doesn't transfer to the next, it doesn't persist to the next session. And because it doesn't, it's not learning.
Yes.
Learning, one of my favorite things is to define learning, because people use learning in like 80 different senses. And in the field of psychology, in the field of motor learning, learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior. When we think of a motor skill, it's really helpful to think in terms of you use the word stability. So if you can do something in a stabilized way, you don't have to have a 100% success rate,
Hmm.
but if it keeps emerging in functionally, it functions proper way, that's learning, right? You have a reasonable success rate, and it keeps showing up. That is that stabilized tactic. That is learning
Hmm.
because it's relatively permanent. It's something that persists. Whereas, just a momentary improvement in form or technique, um, that's not, but that's the way that coaches across martial arts and other sports, they've always measured their ability as instructors based on that immediate feedback and not based on how the person performs across sessions.
Hmm.
which has often led to, especially in martial arts, I've felt fallen into the trap of thinking, man, I know you can do better because I saw you do better. Why are you performing like this in this class? Like, what is wrong with you?
Hmm.
Nothing's wrong with them. It's just it was they organized better under all this bickering and fussing over form, but when it comes to perform again, like the actual perform without all that uh, crutch, um, they don't perform that way because the learning didn't take place. There's it didn't set in, it didn't stick. There's no change in
Hmm.
behavior.
You know, something you mentioned there too that is important is to understand that an athlete's performance will not be consistent all the time and reflect what their capability and skill and ability are, right? And so
Yeah,
when that athlete has, their guard retention looked like crap. I thought they knew all about high legs. They might, and that might be an instant, like that you gotta recognize the zooming out effect because now like, oh, why are they having a half-assed practice? Because humans have half-assed practices sometimes, you know?
right.
And they just understanding
Yeah.
that skill doesn't always look like 100 out of 100. It's above, it's below, it's sort of that mean is what we're really looking at. But
Hmm.
it's so easy. Like I said, it goes back to that early thing. We get super excited about the top 10 and the bottom 10 of whatever is happening in the room. So I get super excited about the people who are doing it just the way I said, and I get super excited at people who are just not doing it the way I said. But the middle, it's
Hmm.
people who are sort of doing it right, or whatever. They're sort of,
Sort
it's
of.
just
Yeah.
natural.
Yeah. That's the non-linearity. This is the term
Hmm.
non-linearity of learning and development. Yeah, which something like an ELO rating represents that pretty well. You can look at chess people who compete, um, and they sometimes lose to people that you would think they wouldn't have lost to. They lose to people
Hmm.
with lower scores. Um, and there's also the reality that people, the newer you are, the more unstable your performance. so as a black belt, you have probably a pretty you're pretty stable with most people that you perform with, unless you're performing with black belts of a certain caliber, um,
Hmm.
that are maybe competitive black belts or you have a trouble dealing with, right? But like club level black belts are not a big deal for you. That's a potential scenario.
Hmm.
Um, it's also why something like an ELO rating is better used for. I've been thinking about. I don't know if you can tell, but I've been thinking about ELO a lot.
Yeah.
It's better at intervals rather than testing every play event that you
Hmm.
engage in, because you're going to take a hit to your. First of all, you're never going to explore and take risks and try to find new styles of play and learn and do new things if you're always risk losing points
Yep.
or losing a rating. Um, but you'll take a hit to your motivation if you see the loss of points every time you lose a round or every time. So you would want to do that more on intervals, like with the same thing with chess. There's only some certain events are rated and some aren't. Um, and most of your play is club level.
Hmm.
So you can screw around with different openings and mid games and end games and stuff at the club level because you don't stand to lose points every every game that you play. So there's a balance you have to strike there for understanding motivation and also understanding you have to make to circle back around to the topic that sparked this. You have to go through the development cycle. Some people go through quicker, some people go through slower. You have to go through the development. You don't get to skip, right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah. Anyway, massive
Yeah,
tangent.
just like I find this is not just in coaching, but for like everyone and everything. If you just zoom out one layer further, everything makes a lot more sense. You react less,
Right.
you're less, it's just my universal answer to a lot of problems is zoom out one level and look at the same problem. Or zoom, look at the same result. How does that fit in this level? You looked at one practice. What about over the last four practices? or with the last 4
Mhm.
times you did this game or whatever it is, like it's super easy to be like, oh, this is not working. We did it this one time. Dead to me. But like it's the zooming out, the trending, being able to find and observe those things. But it's super interesting when you talk about like a practitioner and just like the elo and thinking of that. Super fascinating was like what counts, what doesn't count. Is it, how do we wait? Yeah, super interesting though. But I would love to see something. But yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think I know how to do it with striking because striking is largely a points based, no matter what
Hmm.
type of striking you do. Um, that is relatively straightforward. Although I don't know if a traditional ELO system would be. You'd probably have to spar a million times in a testing format before it gets accurate.
Hmm.
With grappling, I don't know because you could do it with the point system from
Hmm.
IBJJF. I don't think advantages that wouldn't work very well, but ELO is set up to handle draws, so it could work for that. But I don't know. You would have to find a way to artificially weight things towards submissions because the submission is a much greater display of submission grappling skill than simply
Hmm.
maintaining positional dominance, right? So it could be done, but nobody's. You're going to have a million people that you know make pot shots at it because some people are like pure ADCC or pure
Hmm.
um, no time limit, right?
Yeah.
How do you well so so only submission. So you get no point. You
Yeah.
everything you do gets treated like a draw, even if you won because you didn't get a submission. Like that's not enough useful information to calibrate an ELO system, I don't think. So, it would
Right.
be that would be tough too. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. This is again, it's just like grappling is such a variable thing. That's like why it makes
Mhm.
sense that we have to teach and train and try and communicate and help people understand it in like the simplest way. Because otherwise we let them get lost in the sauce of all the complexity. Because they can very much. If I want to tell you it's
Yeah.
complex, you will look and immediately see, oh shit, it's complex. But if I tell you it's simple and I always present it as simple, you're gonna think it's simple, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, dude. Man, this has been awesome. Where can people find you if they want to reach out, pick your brain, figure out what you're doing, ask you questions?
Yeah, I'm always down. Best place is my Instagram at Kabir Bath. If you want to talk to me, I'm super responsive there. I have a site, kaboomkids.com. It's mostly about kids specific stuff. I do some stuff with coaches or owners or whatever, helping them with that. But Instagram for sure on that site is probably a good place. Have a newsletter, some other things there too.
Excellent, man. Well, thanks for coming on, dude. We have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, coaching, my favorite thing. I can do it all day.
For sure, dude. Well, you do professionally almost.
Oh,
But
yes, true, true, true. That is true. I did do that
you
though.
could also talk about it. I can too, for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to the Combat Learning Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice. It really helps us out. Finally, this episode, including the intro music, is produced by Micah Peacock. Thanks in advance, and I'll see you on the next episode.